Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you to all the members of the Old Guard for taking the time to listen to my comments about manufacturing and industrial distribution and the power transmission motion control market. First, I want to make sure, can you guys all see the slide that has the PTDA logo on it?
Looks good.
Awesome, awesome. You know, we've been working remotely since March. And today is actually our first day back as a hybrid staff. So now I'm trying to get used to the technology that I used to have before I started working from home. So I just wanted to make sure everybody could see it. Well, 4,121 meetings. That's amazing. Congratulations to you all. What a milestone for this group. Hopefully I am going to provide you with some information about what's going on in the manufacturing field, the industrial distribution field. I understand a couple of weeks ago you had someone on whose title of their program was "Saving the Human Race." I can't claim that so much, but Alan's right. You know, everything that you do, everything that you touch, every process, manufacturing has a part in that. Manufacturing employs 12 million people in the U.S. alone, and then industrial distribution supports that manufacturing. And it's more than just the making of products. So think of things like mining or agriculture or construction. All of those industries use industrial distribution. So Paul, I know you said you guys know how to do the raise hand function. How many here have either worked in manufacturing or industrial distribution at any time? If you could do your raised hand. I think I saw about 8 or 9 of you.
Yeah. Actually, more than that. I'm seeing the numbers go up. Let's call it 20.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, as you know, it's a very widespread industry. So I know you guys all know about manufacturing, right? Everybody knows what a manufacturing facility was. The products that you buy all came from somewhere. But I want to talk a little bit about industrial distribution because it's more of a hidden industry. And the easiest way to start talking about what industrial distribution is to talk about what industrial distribution is not. So despite having the word distribution in it, it's not typically what people think of as distribution. So industrial distribution is not logistics. It's not UPS or FedEx or the delivery companies that deliver your products. And then industrial distribution is not business to consumer. It's business to business. So there is a field out there for retail distribution. For example, you know how your golf clubs or your fishing equipment or your kayak got up there on the shelf at Dick's Sporting Goods. That's retail distribution. Or institutional distribution. I know last week you had somebody talk about COVID and the vaccines. So the distribution of how those vaccines are getting out there, that would be institutional distribution. But I'm going to focus my comments on industrial distribution. So every company needs industrial distribution to make sure that they have the parts and the components that keep their processes running. Whether they're, rocket launches from NASA or making Coca-Cola products or, all of the equipment that the gymnasts need in a Cirque du Soleil performance, or even something, this is probably when I first got into the industry, this is probably my first realization of how widespread industrial distribution is, and particularly the components our members make and sell, is Walt Disney World. I'm watching all of the roller coasters and all of the rides and everything that happens wouldn't happen without industrial distribution. So to go back to what industrial distribution is, industrial distribution companies provide the products, the parts, and the services and solutions to industrial users. So it's more than just they have the product on the shelf. There's a lot more to it. They serve 2 different categories. One is MRO, which is maintenance, repair, and operations. And that is if something, break and fix. If something breaks, you need somebody to replace it and fix it so that your process can continue. Or OEM, which is original equipment manufacturer. So think about your washing machine. All the components that are in your washing machine, somebody provides those so that they can go into the equipment. So I mentioned industrial distributors are more than just, having the product on the shelf, which is a primary thing, especially nowadays when we're having such supply chain issues. Actually having that product and having it available when your system goes down, when your process goes down, you can't be sitting there with the assembly line not moving, right? You're losing money every second that thing doesn't move. So having somebody who can get the parts there and get them installed so that you're back up and running, that's essential. Engineering and application support. So I heard a few mentions of golf. So think about your golf clubs. The company that makes the golf clubs, their job is to give you a really good golf club that's going to shave about 5 strokes off your game, right? They're thinking about the graft, and they're thinking about the grip and the shaft material. How do they design the surface of the club so that it pops faster off when you hit that tee shot? So while that company is really good at trying to understand what makes a great product, what they might not be good at is understanding how to make that product. Like, what is the most efficient and effective way to get that product from raw material onto the shelf? And that's where an industrial distributor comes along. They know from all of the work that they do with all of their customers how to streamline the process. Because at the end of the day, it's all about getting more product off the shelf at a quicker rate at a lower cost. So that's what they do. So what about something like new product introductions? So, how many of you like woodworking or working on cars as a passion? I see some nodding heads. Whatever your passion, I bet you spend time online or reading magazines about the latest and the greatest tools for your hobby, right? So industrial distributors do that same thing. They know what's coming down the line, what new products are going to speed up that production line, or maybe eliminate a step in the process that's going to go down, that's going to drive the bottom line. And then finally, sourcing of hard to find items. I mentioned those of you who worked on cars. If you work on a vintage automobile, you know how challenging it is to get those original parts. My son just completed his associate's degree in automotive technology, so we talk about nothing but cars. And then he even talks about the challenges that they have at the facility that he works with, at the shop that he works with, about trying to find, replacement parts, something that's going to work. An industrial distributor can help with that. So if a metalworking shop, for example, say is using a press brake that they've had for 50 years, and it's a good, solid piece of equipment, but one part breaks, an industrial distributor can help them find that one part for that kind of, in today's world, an ancient piece of equipment, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what power transmission motion control is. Paul and I, when we talked last week, he told me what he thought power transmission motion control was, which is what we hear all the time. So power transmission motion control are the components found everywhere there's mechanical or electronic movement. What power transmission motion control in our context is not, is the transmission of the electrical grid, of the power along the electrical grid, or your automotive power transmission, that you have in your car. Now, our members' components are used in the electrical grid and they're used in the cars. But what we're talking about power transmission motion control, we're talking about those things that Alan mentioned: motors, bearings, chains, sprockets, gears. If you were to slice a piece of machinery open and look at it, everything that's in that machinery is what our members make and sell and what we consider motion control and power transmission. Even something down to the little motor in here that makes your phone vibrate. That's a power transmission motion control product. So I'm going to walk you through a process and kind of highlight some of the power transmission motion control products that are used in it. And Alan, I might need your expertise here, because while I'm a good association exec, I'm not a great power transmission motion control manufacturer. I think you're on mute, Alan.
I'm here, and you are definitely talking about an industry that I, even to this day, I'm definitely in love with.
Yeah, our members stick around. Once people get in this industry, they don't leave. They may move from company to company, but they don't leave. So let's take a quick look at what it takes to make ketchup. So I am a native Chicagoan. This is beautiful city of Chicago behind me. And even as a native Chicagoan, I do like ketchup, just not on my hot dogs. So So let's talk through the process of ketchup. So it all starts with the harvest, right? Harvesting the tomatoes. So the machinery that's harvesting the tomatoes from that farm, it has motors and it has conveyors and it has belts to get the tomatoes off the ground and into the truck. Then once at the processing plant, those tomatoes are placed on conveyor belts and then into buckets that move it through the sorters and the washers and the ovens, everything that needs to be done to process the tomatoes. All these components, they have to hold up to some rigorous conditions because you've got all this water running through it and you've got the heat of the ovens. And then you've got FDA standards that they have to meet because they're doing food processing. So it's, it sounds like making ketchup's not a problem, but you have to know all of those details in order to do it right. And then once the tomatoes become ketchup, once they've been processed, you're going to see valves and hydraulics and sensors and drives. They move the bottles into position to be filled, and then they cap the bottles, and then they label the bottles, and then they put the bottles in boxes. And that's just one product. So if you've ever checked out the How It's Made videos on YouTube or on the Discovery Channel or the Science Channel, each and every one of those processes is using power transmission motion control products. So before I jump into some of the challenges that our industry is facing, does anybody have any questions about manufacturing or industrial distribution or power transmission motion control products?
Feel free to raise a virtual hand if you want to ask a question. We'll have more questions at the end, of course.
Of course. All right. So let's talk about some of the challenges. And there are three top challenges facing our industry right now. Some are COVID related, some not. Supply chain, logistics and freight, and talent acquisition and retention. So the supply chain challenge, this is just a simple economics issue of supply and demand. So during COVID, companies shifted production based on what they could, from what they could produce, right, what they used to produce, to what their customers needed. So they then held off on producing products that they normally produced because the demand for them wasn't great. So, really smart companies shifted the product manufacturing to what it was needed. Now with the economy ramping back up, we're seeing demand pick up for the usual products, for the things that they used to produce. And then now they need to reprioritize what they're doing as manufacturers. So I'll give you an example. We have a manufacturer member in Quebec that produces industrial specialty chemicals. So these are chemicals like lubricants, adhesives. During COVID, they stopped or scaled back on making those because they made hand sanitizer instead, because that was needed. Well, now they have tons of hand sanitizer. Now they're going back to their standard lubricants and fluids, but now again, it takes some time for them to ramp back in that. In addition, what they're seeing is a shortage of the raw materials and the components used to make these products. If you've tried to buy anything that has a computer chip in it right now, you know that that's probably going to be on back order for a long time. My sister and her husband are building a new home in Phoenix, and they just ordered their appliances. They'll get them in November. So they actually have to, yeah, it's crazy. So they actually have to buy some, they're renting fake appliances so they can put them in the property so they can close, so they can move in. But it's that shortage of the raw materials and the components that's driving it. The other thing that's affecting the supply chain is that second issue that I talked about, which is logistics and freight. So I don't know about you, but during COVID, my online shopping just skyrocketed. I started ordering, groceries and laundry detergent and home office equipment, because even though I had a home office, it wasn't set up to be there all the time, and puzzles and books and all the things that I wanted to do while I was inside. So the boxes just started showing up on my front porch. Well, of course, they didn't just show up, right? They had to get there somehow. So that surge in online ordering led to a surge in shipping. Companies like Amazon and Walmart and Target, they weren't ready. They weren't prepared. Their online shopping wasn't anywhere near pre-COVID what it was during COVID. And so they started outsourcing their shipping. They outsourced it to FedEx and to UPS and the US Mail. And then their suppliers, who were providing the toilet paper and the puzzles and the books that had to go to the distribution center to come to my house, they started ramping up their shipping too. So they're using, truckloads like YRC and Old Dominion to ship their things. So all those freight carriers are now supplying the very lucrative business of supplying Amazon and Walmart and Target. And so the demand has gone up, the supply has gone down, and my poor members are now paying 3 times the cost of what they used to pay pre-pandemic to ship a part to a customer. So that is part of the supply chain challenge. There's just not enough shipping capacity out there. The other thing that's happening because of the lack of shipping capacity is that manufacturers, they can't get the products out to the distributors and the end customers. So while they're manufacturing, those products stay on their floor. And because they don't have room to continue to inventory these because they're supposed to be going out the door, they have to slow down production. So it's a big catch-22. One of the biggest challenges for that logistics and freight, the reason other than, all of us, including me, online shopping, is there's a lack of drivers. I mean, even pre-pandemic, you saw Walmart putting ads on sporting events. You saw ads on their own trucks or even in their own stores, come drive for Walmart, because there's just a lack of drivers. Congress has been trying to address this. They reintroduced what's called the Safe Drive Act, which would lift the federal restrictions on commercial drivers. Right now, if you are 18, you can get a CDL in most states, but you can't drive across state lines, right? So that doesn't help. There's not a lot of in-state shipping. There's a lot of intrastate shipping. So they're working on getting that Safe Drive Act passed so that those who are under 21 but hold a CDL can make deliveries across straight lines. So, we've got the challenges all over the place. The lack of drivers, it happens because of the demographics, right? So I said earlier that there are 12 million people employed in manufacturing. A third of those are going to retire in the next 10 years. That's huge. That's unprecedented, and it's tough. So I'm kind of good at math, but that just to me looks like a really, really large number. But this isn't something that the pandemic brought on, right? I mean, this demographic issue has been coming down the line for a while. Now, why we've been able to avoid it a little bit because we've got a lot of baby boomers who are not retiring, or they're changing careers, or they're staying on through their career. But even when they do, there's not going to be enough Gen Y or Gen Z workers to fill those jobs. The challenge for our industry in particular is that it's not sexy. It's not well known. People, when they have a choice of where they're going to work, they really want to go work someplace that people understand what it is that they do. And I know this particular issue, this talent challenge, has been near and dear to Alan's heart for a very long time. I think one of the challenges that we've uncovered is that the industry's humble. They don't do a very good job of talking about what it is that they do, right? Nobody goes home and says, hey, you know what I did today? I helped Coca-Cola figure out a better way to cap their Dasani water bottles, right? I mean, it's just not something that anybody talks about during cocktail parties. In fact, when I ask my members, when you go to a cocktail party and somebody asks, what do you do? What do you tell them? And they say, I usually say I'm in sales. I'm like, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? Because what you do is so essential and it's so important. And so, they need to do a better job of telling their story. So many employees today come from inside referrals. But if your employees aren't out there talking about what it is that they do, their friends aren't going to know what they do. They aren't going to want to come work with them. So it's kind of this catch-22. But it makes what I do so enjoyable because they are a humble bunch of guys. I mean, they care about what they do. They have such passion for it with each other. They just need to show that passion externally. So I'm going to just 2 slides about who we are and what we do. So as Alan mentioned, the Power Transmission Distributors Association has been in existence since 1960. It's a trade association of both distributors and manufacturers, specifically in the power transmission motion control industry. When I was talking to Paul and we were talking about, trying to describe what it is that power transmission is, and I said, my biggest challenge as the CEO of PTDA is first I have to describe what power transmission is, and then I have to describe what it is that I do for our members. So we have 4 focuses for our organization. Networking and community. This is a relationship business. When you've got those supply chain issues, you pick up the phone and you call somebody you know. And so we help foster those networks and that community. Knowledge of your customers, providing intelligence on what's going on in the ketchup making industry, what's going on in the golf club making industry, what's going on in agriculture or mining, so that our members can do a better job of serving their customers. Industry insights. This is a little broader. This is kind of the information that I talked about. The supply chain came out of our industry insights. What's going on in the world, and what is it that our members need to be better at? A big focus for us right now is digitalization. If you'd asked me, 2 years ago, would I be able to get a whole bunch of members, 350 members, to attend a virtual convention? The answer would be heck no. Hello, COVID. We had 350 people at our convention in October. So it worked. And then the last one's professional development, just providing kind of brand agnostic training to employees about what's a bearing, how does it work, how do you measure it, how do you specify it. So that's kind of what our organization does. We also have an organization, a charitable organization attached to the trade association. It's the PTDA Foundation. And the PTDA Foundation's sole purpose right now is helping our industry employers be better employers. As I said, they're humble. They don't talk about themselves. When it comes to things like employee recruitment, they need to understand what makes them attractive as an employer. They're phenomenal sales guys. Our guys can, they can say, what is it? You can still snow and all that, snow to an Eskimo or something like that. Isn't that the phrase? So they're great at selling the products and services that they have. What they've not been good at, because they haven't had to do it, is selling themselves as employers. So we're helping them with tools, helping them kind of position what it is that they do in terms that Gen Y and Gen Z will find attractive. And then, of course, once you get them, you got to keep them, right? So what is it going to take for your employees to want to stay with you? And then finally, motivation and management. So kind of all of those HR questions. So that's what our foundation has been focusing on. So that's it. That's my quick overview of manufacturing and industrial distribution and our industry. And I would love to answer any questions anybody may have about what's going on in the world right now.
Great, thank you, Ann. So at this point, please raise your hands, your virtual hands. If you don't know how to do that, you could try to wave a hand in front of a camera, and there's a chance that we might eventually see it. But we have a lot of tiles to look at. Mitch, you get to kick it off.
Thank you, Ann. Thanks for all you guys do behind the scenes, because without bearings and my favorite one is O-rings. O-rings are like the savior of the world since World War II. As we look to the future, I'm a scientist by training, and so I think a lot about sensors. And as we look to the future, a few years ago, and I just looked it up while I was listening to you, the 1 trillion sensor movement seems to have gone away, but there was a movement to get a trillion sensors, which is actually not that hard when you start counting the sensors that are in your home, or in your case, the office you're in right now. And then, of course, if you go get in your car, wow, there's a lot of sensors. And so sensors, Internet of Things, automation. How do you see your industry rolling with all of that stuff as it comes along? Because I think it's going to be it's going to be a brave new world. And before you answer, I want to just put something out there for the members here. When you think of Internet of Things, people start talking about your refrigerator telling you you're out of beer. And that's the most bullshit example. There's some really, really cool examples of the Internet of Things, both at the home level and at the industrial level. So with that little sermonette, tell us what you think of the future looks like for you guys, Ann.
Sure. Well, I'll use your refrigerator example as an example because people understand it. So it's not just that your refrigerator tells you that you're out of sour cream. It then sends a message to Whole Foods, and it knows what kind of sour cream you order. So it orders that particular sour cream and it gets it on the truck and it ships it out to you. So all of those involve sensors. One of the things that our industrial distributors, particularly the larger ones, have been very, very active in is vendor managed inventory. And so this is where the customer doesn't have to continuously place orders for things that they know that they're going to use. That's managed by the distributor. So think of something like a vending machine. And these are becoming much more prevalent in large companies who want to get a handle on the costs that they're experiencing. You can put pretty much anything in a vending machine. You can put safety goggles. You can put gloves. You can put drill bits. You can put bearings. You can put belts. You can put whatever you want in a vending machine. And so somebody can go swipe their card and get whatever it is that they need. However, what's happening in the sensors is that sensor is telling you that that belt is going bad. Like it's slipped just a little bit. So you need a new one. And it'll get that new one and it'll bring it there and it'll get it to you so that you can put it in as predictive maintenance instead of MRO. We're also seeing, gosh, you guys know tolerances. I mean, how finely do you have to do something so that it fits specifically? Sensors are just essential there because that's not something even the human eye can see. Gosh, I could go on and on about it. Alan probably has a lot more information about it than I do because I know that he's always on top of it. But yeah, I mean, the Internet of Things is real. You're going to see it much more prevalent. That will be one way that we address this talent shortage is by trying to replace it with technology. But that's not going to be the case forever. I mean, you're not always going to be able to, have a great conversation with a computer that's going to get you the solution you need. So, Mitch, did I answer your question?
Well, yeah, and just one quick observation on a personal level. We had to go buy another printer thingy for our computers at home. And when we started setting it up, they said, would you like to subscribe to the ink option?
Mm-hmm.
And we did. And it senses when we're out of this, that, and the other color ink, and it sends it along. And we don't have to think about renting out the Staples to get, $50 worth of ink. So that's a good example at a consumer level.
Yep.
And your example of belts and, part wear in general, and, airplanes, factories, whatever, is huge. So yeah, I'm going to stop and we get plenty of other people with questions.
Okay. Paul, you're muted.
Sorry. Okay. I have a quick question for you. Back about the structure of your industry. I mean, you make it sound like the main job that you describe is what I would call a consultant, a person who goes into a factory and joins a group temporarily to help, somebody who knows a lot, is very inventive and very knowledgeable, and helps them re-engineer a process or create a new process. And then other people are going to run it. And so that person then goes on and does other things. So I don't know why you don't use the word consultant because that's a sexy word out in the world at large. But now I'm wondering whether most of the members of your professional society association are freelancers, or are they hired by companies who are actually in the business of hiring out consultants to solve problems? We have we have consultants that do that for business, and they're very well known. And it sounds like you're the analog for technological solutions. And probably also, are your members of the association actually employed full-time by big companies who have in-house consultants and freelancers that go around and troubleshoot and reinvent things and then move on to other projects? So what's the mix?
So I have a bias because we're a trade association. So the members of our association are the companies themselves, not the individuals. So in our case, every company has employees that do this. all of the industrial distribution companies, and they range in size from under $2 million in sales to over $5 billion. I mean, it's huge, the gamut. But you're right, they do act kind of on a consultative basis, where they're going in and lending their expertise about a particular process to the manufacturer, to the processor. But in all of our cases, they are employees, not independent consultants, because again, just the nature of our industry, of our association.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So, John Baxter, you're next.
Okay, I liked your presentation, especially on the logistics part. That's what I did for 37 years and for 10 years as a consultant. But right now, it's a very serious problem because there's a shortage of drivers. There's a shortage of boxes for the intermodal carriers, meaning the railroads, and there's a shortage of a placement of ships. So since a lot of our supply chains come from overseas, the ships have to get back in position. The boxes have to be unloaded and moved to the right ports. So we've got about a 4 to 5 month, maybe longer, very, very critical shortage, where it used to cost $3,000 to move a truck from New Jersey to Los Angeles. It's now 10. Mm-hmm. So, and this is going to go on for quite a while. The other problem is that all the manufacturing that was concentrating on, like you say, hand sanitizers or masks or things for the pandemic are now being manufactured in other countries. And so they're stuck with inventory all over the place. So we've got a very, very serious problem right now. What do you think we can do about it?
Oh man, if I had that answer, I could retire to my private island. I don't know. I just saw a presentation that was done by an organization called truckstop.org. They're a trade association for freight. They anticipate not until the end of 2022.
Even longer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do they think they're going to be able to get the supply back with the demand? But yeah, like I said, this is one of the top 3 challenges my members are facing, and I would love to provide them with a solution, but I don't. Sorry.
They alluded to the fact after the Second World War, we really do, where everything was out of position. The boys were coming home. The employees. It was a very, very serious a problem. I don't know what they're going to do in the future, but these long-term supply chains. The other thing is, if you're a manufacturer and you're trying to buy something, you go to your supplier. He may be not in business anymore, or he may be making something different. So it's really, you got a hard job. So keep it up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so Tony Canona, you're up.
Well, yeah, and very good view. And I have a question. I know you're doing a good job there, but I have a question about solar cells, components for them, assemblies, and installation. Do you see any relaxation in the shortages of the photo cells and the brackets, bolts, and etc.?
You know, I don't know about solar, but I know about wind, because think about those big turbines. Those bearings, you know, they're like the size of a building, right? And pre-pandemic, the waiting list on those bearings was 2 years. So I can only imagine that solar is just as desperate, because they're so specialized. You know, you can only use them for specific reasons. But I'm sorry, I don't have any information specifically about that. I can just relate it to kind of the wind turbine industry, where it's a big challenge. You know, everybody's looking for new solutions, and we're all trying to be flexible, and we're all trying to try new technology, and manufacturers have a hard time anticipating that demand so they can meet it when it finally gets to the point where they can go into production.
Okay, so next, Steve Arley.
Thank you, Ann. The pandemic has obviously wreaked havoc with supply chains in the short term. But I'd be curious, what are your thoughts about the long-term impacts on just-in-time inventory and inventory levels, not only in your industry, but perhaps on industry in general?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. And this is my personal opinion. I think it'll moderate. I think eventually we're gonna get back to a point where, you know, barring any other black swan events, that, you know, eventually it all catches up and it evens out. You know, we are our economist. You know, I talked about our industry insights. We have an economist that we work with, and he's forecasting the Roaring 20s. You know, so he yeah. Right up until 2030, when the whole world is going to crash. But that's a whole nother. I have to talk to him about my retirement plan. But they anticipate that people are going to come out of this. They're going to be enthusiastic. They're going to, you know, we're going to go back to seeing kind of the increase in supply and demand like we had before. And eventually it'll moderate. It'll get to the point where people feel like that they are comfortable. People feel like they have a better handle on what to anticipate. I think, you know, going back over the last 18 months when you had no idea, I mean, as an association, we had planned to do strategic planning last year, and we were laughing. We're like, we can't even forecast 3 months out, much less 3 years out. So I think once people kind of start anticipating what's going to happen, and we get through these kind of post-COVID immediate issues, you'll see supplies come back. I mean, you can get toilet paper now, right? And 16 months ago, you couldn't get any toilet paper. So it eventually all evens out. And that's just my opinion. I don't have anything to back that up.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Al Aho.
And you have a tough job.
I get to work with wonderful people like Alan, though, which makes it easy.
I'm curious, has the field of artificial intelligence affected your industry, and in what ways?
Yeah, gosh, I wish I were smarter about artificial intelligence. Yes, yes, it is a big looming trend. Let's put it that way. You know, the whole idea of, you know, we were talking about sensors, right? And that's kind of like the lowest level of artificial intelligence. You know, eventually we're going to get to the point where, you know, you are going to be able to say, here's my problem, and the computer's going to say, here's 3 solutions for it, right? Where right now that's being done by individuals, you know, and then learning from it, right? Putting the solution in place, understanding what was wrong with it, so that the next time it gets recommended, it gets changed. It is not as prevalent as it is in, say, the scientific field, for example. I always say that our industry is about 10 years behind the curve. Like I said, if we hadn't pushed them to Zoom because of COVID, we're probably still trying to figure out how we're going to do a virtual meeting. But yeah, it'll get there. It'll get there. And I wish I could predict the ways how, because that's where I'd make my investments right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a follow-up myself about that, and it's also kind of a follow-up on a couple of the other questions. You know, the changing nature of manufacturing. In the old days, you build a factory and it would be all purpose-built to build a particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then along come automobiles that have new model years. And so for a very long time, at least that industry has designed their factories so that they can retool for next year's model. Mm-hmm. So they can repurpose all of their machinery. Some things have to be rebuilt from scratch, but most of it probably is just reorganizing things. And nowadays, most factories are driven by software and computers and, you know, and quote, robots, which don't necessarily look like human beings, but are just machines. Mm-hmm. And one of the pictures I sent around to people today was actually a very complex assembly line in a car factory with these orange robots that, you know, and I'm thinking there must be a concept of a pop-up factory that you don't build a factory from scratch. You kind of repurpose what you've already got to build a different product. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that the Chinese are really good at that. And that's one of the reasons that they have been able to kind of usurp a lot of American manufacturing because they can create a new product, you know, with whatever factories they have, they can retool them. And a lot of the retooling has to be done by software because it's the same machinery, but you've got to reprogram it to do something different.
Right.
So this gets to what Al is talking about. And I'm wondering whether the software engineers or the IT specialists that do that part of the retooling are themselves candidates for membership in your professional association.
The individuals are not, but their companies would be. So whoever they were working for would be. I think the other thing that you're seeing, Paul, besides the robotics, which absolutely, you know, it's fascinating to watch. Like you watch those how it's made videos, they're almost all robotics where they're taking a raw piece of metal and they're turning it until it turns into something like, oh my gosh, how could you do that? And again, it goes back to the tolerances. I think the other things that we're seeing is kind of breaking apart the assembly line. You know, the whole Henry Ford, you know, create the assembly line. Here's where you start. At the end of the day, at the end of the line, you get a finished product is not so prevalent anymore. You're seeing stations built to manufacture components, and then it's moved to another station where it's then used for another purpose, which gives them the ability to kind of retool a lot faster, because they only have to retool that module, or they only have to retool that area, and they don't have to retool the entire line. Now they do have to take, of course, they have to take into account the process. Like you can't have this machine cranking out 7 times more than what you need down the line. But you're almost seeing, like I said, kind of the deconstruction of the assembly line. But the software engineers and the guys running those CNC machines that create just, oh my gosh, just such magnificent engineered pieces, plasma cutting tables, and all of that. Literally with the stroke of a few keys and some clicks, they can go from making those, cutting out the metal for those huge turbines that I talked about, to creating, you know, a bearing for the wheel of a railroad car. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's a lot more flexible than it used to be, and I think the whole processing.
To say nothing of 3D printing.
Absolutely. Additive manufacturing. That's another big thing. You know, I mean, some of our manufacturers are a little bit scared of it. Some of our distributors are starting to do it, which makes them manufacturers and distributors. So it's a real challenge for us right now to try to keep up with all of them.
Yeah. Mark.
Yes, thank you. As you know, there's a lot of legislation on the table, federal legislation, to do with infrastructure and social policy. So we have things like highways, bridges, we have communication network issues. We also have the social parts like childcare, minimum wage, etc. From your perspective, what would be the outstanding parts that you would be concerned with, if any?
I don't know that I'm smart enough to answer that question. We do not, as an association, take an advocacy position. We work with both the National Association of Wholesaler Distributors, NAW, and the National Association of Manufacturers, NAM. We work with them to kind of take the positions for our members, because man, that's a whole different world, isn't it? You know, what's going on in Washington. You know, I can tell you our members are thrilled about the whole infrastructure, because it means more of their products being used, you know, not just in the roads, but the equipment that you need to build the roads. But I can also tell you from an employer perspective, they're also facing challenges. You know, how do you make sure that your employees can be at the job when they need to be at the job? Not every job is a work from home job. In fact, most of our members, manufacturers and distributors, were considered essential during COVID, and they had to go into the office. You cannot, you know, supply bearings from your basement. It just doesn't work that way. So they are having the challenges of being an attractive employer and providing the flexibility for childcare, healthcare, all of those things that you need to take care of your family if you're an employee. So, you know, I don't have an opinion so much on legislation, but I do know that our members would love to see that that infrastructure bill passed. I will also say they would love to see it passed without an increase in their own tax rates. But who doesn't say that, right?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
thanks, Mark. Boppy.
I think you take a view of one country, but can you take a view of multiple countries?
So we're a North American association. So we're Canada, the US, and Mexico. We do have a European affiliate who has Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. I can tell you right now that their focus right now is not so much on business as it is getting back to business. I mean, they're struggling with COVID. They're struggling with vaccines. I mean, even in Canada, you know, my first vice president is in Ontario, and he can't go visit somebody in Quebec because they can't even cross a province border. So I think they're still, I think overseas they're still kind of where we were when the pandemic first struck and we locked everything down. And that's just from what I hear. I don't have any really insights into that.
Thank you. Mitch.
Yeah, hey, Ann, me again. We've worked really hard as a society since, pick a date, World War II, whatever, on squeezing labor out of, everything. Labor is way down in agriculture, thank God. Automation here and there and yonder. We were just talking about robots on the auto assembly line. The one area where I have not been able to figure out in my own mind, maybe you got some ideas, is the last mile, the last 100 yards. And you showed your example of Ketchup. Okay, today, Ketchup, I'm guessing there's not a lot of human hands from the time it's a plant in the farm till it's in a bottle, a squeeze bottle. But after that, you got somebody that has to drive the truck. You got somebody that has to offload the pallet, somebody who has to take that case of ketchup and go to aisle 13 and put it on the shelf. There's a lot of manual labor that I just don't see how we squeeze. And then, of course, if you order it online, you mentioned that, you still got some driver from FedEx walking up with a 3-pound package and setting it on your porch, or my son lives in Brooklyn. He can't receive packages because they'll be disappear, gone. So, but anyway, automation of our delivery, the last mile, what are you seeing?
I have no idea. That I feel the same. I think the same thing myself. We were just at the grocery store yesterday, and my daughter's like, "Mom, look at," it was an international grocery store, and they had beans. They had like an entire shelf of beans. She's like, "Look at how perfectly they're placed, right? They're all the right color. They're all, and so I don't know. That's an interesting question, Mitch. And part of me thinks, the Jetsons, where it just kind of like gets into your refrigerator, like somebody shoves it into your refrigerator for you. If somebody could unpack my groceries, I would be more than happy. But I think at some point you also get into privacy issues. Like for now, Amazon will deliver to my garage, like inside I live out in the suburbs. So Amazon would deliver to my garage if I wanted them to. I give them a one-time code. The dude can open the garage door, put the stuff in, and then shut the garage door. Well, my son can't even get the garage door shut sometimes, so I don't even know how he is going to do it. So I think there are some privacy as well as familiarity and comfort. I think people are more than willing to have that happen for their business. Yeah, come in, put it on my shelf, whatever. Maybe not so much from a consumer's perspective. That's, again, my opinion.
Well, and you end up with, okay, so you have a Frito guy at a grocery store putting the free, it's still the same human labor, it's just a different paycheck. And if you go back, and I didn't personally witness this, but go back to the 1950s, and the milkman used to come in and put it in the refrigerator in house. And today, not happening.
Nope.
But if you and I figure this out, we can both retire to our private island. Let me tell you.
Yes, we did a staff field trip to an Amazon distribution center, of which there are dozens here in the Chicago area. And there's still people there, right? They're always still looking for people, but the amount of automation that they have, I mean, the truck comes in, somebody, manual labor, right? Somebody scans it and puts it on a shelf, any shelf, right? They bring the shelves to them. They're on robots. They bring the shelves to them. They scan it, they put it on the shelves, it goes away. Somewhere, somebody else says, I need this. It brings the shelf to them, tells them where to get it, and they take it and they put it in a box that the computer has told them what size of the box is, which, by the way, their computers need a lot of help because I keep getting these little bitty items in these really big boxes. But they're working on it. They're working through that. And I know, you know, like I talked about with the demographics and the talent shortage, that technology, figuring out that technology is going to be key to being able to walk that last mile to get that package on the shelf and into the customer's cart.
Thanks. Ken Lindhorst.
Thank you. I have two comments and then you can reflect on them. One is, when will this supply chain work itself out? And that it will. You know, the capitalistic system will work it out.
Mm-hmm.
And when will not necessarily be the same time for each product. It
Right.
will work itself out and it will vary by product and function. The second thing is, way back when I was in a college as an undergraduate, they had a course in purchasing, basically providing the right time, place, and price utility, getting the right thing at the right time at the right place. Today, I believe, because there's so many interrelated activities, getting the cheapest chip is not necessarily important. It's getting the chip in the place at the right time. If you have to shut down your entire production line because you can't get the chips for your car. So what I think you do is help manage the trade-offs between price, time, and place utility.
Yes, perfect. You got to, can you work for us? So I'll answer that second question first. So
I'm retired.
An industrial distributor's worst enemy is somebody who is in purchasing in a very large organization, because they tend to be people who are looking only at the bottom line. How much does that product cost? You know, get it to me. What they're not looking at, and this is a big challenge, particularly for our members, is what we call TCO, total cost of ownership, right? So it's not, is it the cheapest product? It's not the cheapest product if you have to replace it 6 times. And I have this other product that you have to replace once for those 6 times. So when you factor in all that downtime, as well as, you know, the hassle and not having the product on the shelf. So purchasing has to become more knowledgeable about what the total cost of ownership is. So yes, that is still an issue, and you nailed it on the head. As opposed to, the other question was your estimate on when do I think the supply chain will moderate? Based on what our economist is telling, it's going to be no earlier than the end of 2022. So, you know, we're all going to have a challenge. I heard that
For some products, but not for all.
Right. And I actually heard this from one of my members. One of the biggest challenges they have in the supply chain, cardboard boxes. They can't get enough cardboard boxes to package their stuff. Again, they should go talk to Amazon, who's sending me this little bitty thing in the big box. So
Capitalism will take care of that.
Amazon is the cause of their problem. They've cornered the market on cardboard boxes.
Right. Well, and you know, and I'm kind of adding to the problem, because not only am I buying everything for Amazon, we also did a kitchen remodel during COVID, which was planned pre-COVID. All of those cabinets came in a box, a big box, a lot of cardboard.
You know, I feel guilty about that. So I batch my Amazon orders, and guess what? They come in individual boxes. Rick Smith.
Ann, excellent presentation. You made a complex topic very understandable. Appreciate it. Just curious, from kind of personal point of view, how do you get interested in this field? I mean, when you were younger, do you take stuff apart, put it back together? I mean, now.
I will frankly admit that I could not be a power transmission motion control distributor. No way. My personal background is I've been in association management for 35 years now. I have a bachelor's degree in English. I have a master's in finance. And so my job is to take all of my members' ideas and make them happen within the constraints that we have to deal with. As far as our members go, we have a lot of legacies, right? We have a lot of family-owned businesses. So somebody gets into the business because they spent their weekends and holidays, cleaning the shelves at dad's shop. We have a lot of engineers who are, they don't want to spend their day sitting behind a computer just designing things. They want to provide solutions. We do have a lot of tinkerers. I always say that my son would be a great industrial distributor, but that's the last place he's going to go because that's where his mom is. So yeah, and one of the slides that I had in the presentation I ended up taking out is industrial distributors provide all kinds of careers: accounting, HR, IT, marketing. I mean, it's not just sales and it's not just product. Anything that a business needs to run, an industrial distributor has positions available in it. So there's just lots of opportunities. It's just a matter of what you want to get out of it.
Again.
Thank you. Rich Jager.
Thank you very much, Ann, for a fascinating look behind the curtain. I'm curious about the consulting aspect of your association. You started answering part of my question just a minute ago. What kind of professionals do you have? And can you give us an interesting example of a recent consulting that your association did with one of your members to help them solve a problem or whatever it was?
So our association does not work on one-on-one with member companies. We kind of work on the, gosh, now I can't think of the term, economies of scale, right? Where we're trying to come up with programs and services that are going to meet the needs of many of our members. So I was talking about our training programs. We have a product, that Power Transmission Handbook, that, gosh, Alan, you could probably tell me what the first color was of the cover of the Power Transmission Handbook.
Yellow.
It's yellow. It's blue now. So we work with we're not the experts, as I mentioned. We're kind of the people who take all of their knowledge, all of the subject matter experts, and turn it into something that can be used more broadly by our members. So that Power Transmission Handbook is revamped every 5 or 6 years, and it's revamped using the knowledge of our members. We say, is this still true? Is this like the latest and greatest it is on the bearing? Now, it's not their job to turn it into a chapter and get it produced and get it out on the market. So my team, there's 8 of us on staff. We've got somebody dedicated to marketing, somebody dedicated to our meetings and programs, because that's our huge thing, is bringing our members together. We have somebody dedicated to our foundation, which I was just talking about, working on the talent shortage issue. We have, and then we have all the back office people. We have IT, and we have finance, and we have operations management, and then we have one person whose total job is to work with our committees, and just take their knowledge and turn it into things that we can use. Trying to think, I know she's putting together a presentation right now to put together a new learning management system, which we don't have, as well as putting together kind of a process. She manages the process where our manufacturer members take their data, they put it in a format, and they send it off to our distributors so that it's consistent every single time and it's automated. She's working on something like that. So we've got more ideas than we can execute on. How about that?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Sure.
So Ron Hoke, you get to ask the last question.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was very interesting, Ann.
Thank you.
One of the things that you did in your presentation was to put a spotlight on issues that many of us weren't even aware of. An industry that many of us wasn't even aware of. And you mentioned Henry Ford. Ford, of course, was the person that developed the concept of an assembly line.
Mm-hmm.
And Ford also, as I recall, tried to manufacture all the parts that went into his automobile to the extent that he could in his own facility, so that Ford was independent, didn't have to rely that much on other industries. For example, they made their own paint. I don't think any automobile manufacturers make their own paint anymore. And I think I'm seeing a trend, and I'd like to ask you to comment on this, where manufacturers are getting more, moving more in the direction of being assemblers, and that more of their parts are being manufactured by other companies. For example, I think most automobile companies have their transmissions made by other companies and put those into the automobiles. They don't make them themselves. And I think they're dependent more and more on companies that are developing the computerized systems, et cetera, et cetera. But is this a trend? And if so, doesn't that tend to make your industries even more critical? That automobile manufacturers, for example, are becoming, as I said, more like assemblers, depending on other companies to provide them with key parts that they put together and make the final product.
I think part of it is because the manufacturing process has become so specialized. Like you need to know, it's the knowledge that you need to have to create particular parts. Like if you know, the automotive companies wanted to specialize in transmissions, they probably have to buy somebody who did it. It's not some knowledge that they're going to develop from scratch. So yes, and it is huge for our members. You know, I mentioned OEMs earlier, original equipment manufacturers. While some of the manufacturers do sell direct to other manufacturers, they'll say, you know, we'll sell you, you know, a million bearings to put in the next Ford Escort. Sometimes that can be done through an industrial distributor, because not only do they bring the product, they bring the expertise. The very first member visit that I did when I started at PTDA was a couplings manufacturer out in Downers Grove. And I'm watching the process and I'm looking at the machinery, and I said to the guy who's giving me the tour, I said, are there couplings in the machinery that you use to make couplings? And he said, yes, of course there are. And I said, well, are they your couplings? And he said, only if it doesn't violate the warranty. So, you know, it's a very incestuous business that our members have, because their products are used in their competitors' components. Their products are used in their own components, in their own machinery. You know, and so I do think that that you'll continue to see the specialization from a manufacturing standpoint. From an industrial distribution standpoint, actually what you're seeing is more generalization. And that's because companies are tired of buying from 3 different places. They want to buy everything that they buy from one. They're trying to narrow down, right? They don't want to have, especially very large companies, like take Pepsi, for example, right? They've got plants all over the country. They don't want to have to buy this part from this distributor and this part from this distributor and this part from this distributor. They want national contracts. They want it all handled, so they have to deal with one person and they have one vendor to pay. So from an industrial distribution standpoint, you're seeing more generalization. They're taking on more different types of products because their customers are asking for it. But from a manufacturer standpoint, while there are definitely some broad line manufacturers, they are kind of staying in their lane about what it is that they're good at.
Thank you.
So, and I see that it's 11:37, but before I hand the mic to Alan to say a round of thanks, I see we have one more hand raised, and if it's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Alan Chenoweth.
Oh, thank you. It's sort of following on from the last question that you were answering. But as I was trying to think of what your business is all about, I couldn't help but keep coming back to thinking of standards. How much influence do you have on achieving standards in the whole area of distribution? I think of one obvious example is that in retrospect, why on earth didn't they think of containerization as a standard process? Why did it take them the world so long to standardize on container shipments and so on? And I just wondered to what extent you have influence, or your association has influence in standards bodies for the industries.
So in terms of standards for the products themselves, we are very fortunate that we have partners with a lot of the manufacturing associations, the American Gear Manufacturers Association, the Belting Association, the Bearing Manufacturers Association, and we leave it to them to work on the standards for the products. As far as standards for the distribution, standards for the data, standards for the information, that's definitely something that we work on. You know, we try to take the best of the best, right? I call it Pulitzer Prize plagiarism, only steal from the good ones. And we try to take their best idea, and as I said, bring it to scale. Like try to find a way that we can get it out to everybody in a simple and easy format. But it's mostly around data rather than it is process. So does that answer your question, Alan?
Yeah, it helps.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, sure.
Thank you, Alan. So at this point, I'm going to ask Alan Havison to step back in and say a few words and do our little ceremony at the end, if you know what we're talking about. Take it away, Alan.
Ann, thank you. I have a whole list of comments about things that were brought up, and I'd like to just take a moment and try to answer just a couple of them. And one was, someone asked about what a distributor in this industry has done for its customers. And I'll give the fellows two examples. One, a year, maybe more now, I can't remember. We had a speaker talk to us from Singer. And at the end of Singer Manufacturing's presentation, I was one of the last to make a comment, and all I did was thank the speaker for being a very valued Eastern Bearing customer. And he went on for a couple of minutes to tell the friends, people in the audience, what Eastern Bearing did for Singer. And one of my friends said, "How much did you pay him to say that?" You know, but we were a value supplier. We sold bearings, we sold for their sewing machines, we sold retaining rings for their sewing machines, we sold the cycloanylate Loctite. Remember years ago, they used that in a number of other products. And the best one, I think, one day I was at Thomas & Betts in Elizabeth, and if people remember back in the day, Thomas & Betts was one of the foremost manufacturers of electrical boxes and electrical connection products. And they were assembling their electrical boxes that go into the walls by hand with a special tool to insert a retaining ring to keep a series of retaining rings to keep the box and its cover in place. And the fellow was complaining about how long it took. So between the two of us, they had an impact tool there. Plus we removed from the hand tool the part that fit the retaining ring, and automatically they were able to, by playing around, because of the knowledge, my experience of the product, knowledge, how this thing might work, we were able to assemble their electrical boxes automatically. The same, if some people remember the Johnny 7 toys, one of the fellows that worked with me in my company had a very creative mind, and we developed a program or a series process for them to automatically paint the Johnny 7 toys. And there were many others. One of the things that the distributors in this association and the manufacturers strive to offer is a value-added benefit. And that is when Ann said something about the cost and replacing a product once instead of 5 or 6 times. Understanding what that cost is, if you go out and buy, if you will, and I hate the word cheap, because the word itself implies that the product is that way. But people always say, I want it at a cheap price. And you get what you pay for. And it was my company's effort to sell value-added benefit and showing them how we could save them money all through the line. From distribution, I went to manufacturing, and I just want to show 2 items. This is a part of a shaft. As in my last business, we bought our own steel, hardened it, and ground it to a specific precision, and then sold this to customers who did other things. And this is one of the items that came from this. And you can see, you can't see clearly, but there are splines, channels built in this with a few holes and at a point, but it all came from this. And that's what I did in my last career as a manufacturer. And the key for members of the Power Transmission Distributors Association, as I see it today, is that we take the products manufactured by our manufacturers and the manufacturers we represent and apply them to the application. And no, not all of us are engineers, but we do hire and we employ people who have the technical background. And it is a very committed industry of people who get their jollies from being problem solvers. So with that, I am someone who was in the industry and part of the PTDA. And by the way, in that first handbook that came out, and I can't remember which chapter I authored, but it came through the first a young leaders group, or I forget what we were called in the beginning, which was formed in Sarasota, Florida, a long time ago. And I want to thank you personally for all you do, you and Brenda and your staff, for this absolutely essential industry for us. You are a very special woman, and I thank you for what you've done for the PTDA.
Oh.
And Paul just brought up the certificate, which I will be sending to you in the next day.
Oh, yay.
And I hope that you will hang it in the office prominently. So, and if someone says, what is that to do? That was one of the old guys. Me. Who still has the products in his and the Orchid Center was at one time Summit, New Jersey, and we're the Summit Old Guard. So we award this certificate. And if you were local, which I wish you were, I would have presented you with an orchid itself.
Oh.
And a free lunch. Okay. Maybe at a Jersey diner. Okay?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Alan, I will take a rain check. I'll take a rain check on that.
Oh, I'm going to hold you to it, and I do hope and I'm going to send you a note, but I noticed behind you, the building, very different from Higgins Road in Park Ridge, Illinois.
Yeah.
A long time. But thank you very much, and thank you for being part of this program. And I hope that all the members of the association see the value of what we do and now better understand me and my passion for this industry.
Well, thank you for your time and for your questions. You guys ask really, really smart questions.
Now let me ask everybody to give you the Old Guard salute. In person, it would be a standing ovation.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.